to start with a Land Acknowledgement by Rod Hines. Over to you, Rod.
Thank you, Gordon. Yes, my name's Rod Hines. I'm Principal Planner with Community Planning Scarborough District in the City Planning Division. And I'm very privileged to acknowledge today that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and is within the territory of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rod. As I mentioned, we're seeing 22 Metropolitan Road. I wanted to thank you again for joining, and thank you to the proponent team for your patience. We were a little bit behind schedule. This is an official plan application as well as the first review. We have an hour and 15 minutes which are scheduled for this review, and there will be a vote at the end. Staff will be given 6 minutes to make their presentation and then a 15-minute presentation by the consultant. In both cases, when we get to 1 minute before the end of those time periods, I will gently butt in and let you know you have a minute left. And then discussion will follow after that. Before I go to roll call, I just wanted to remind everybody that this session is being live streamed on YouTube and is also being recorded. And the recording will be also available on the City Planning YouTube channel following the meeting. So next I'll move on to roll call. And panel members, when I call your name, just let me know if you're there, and then also whether you have a conflict of interest. And we'll start with Jessica.
Present, no conflict.
Great, thank you. Juhi.
Present, no conflict.
Thanks, Juhi. Heather.
Here and no conflict.
Thanks, Heather. Michael.
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, present and definitely no conflict.
Thank you. Joe.
Here, no conflict.
Thank you, Joe. Ralph.
Here, no conflict.
Thanks, Ralph. Olivia.
Here and no conflict.
Thank you, Olivia. Paul.
Here, no conflict.
Thanks, Paul. Anna.
Present, no conflict.
Thanks, Anna. And Eladia. Eladia, are you there? Leanne.
I'm present, no conflict, sorry.
Okay, thanks very much, Eladia. Okay, thank you. So we're going to move into the staff presentation. And as soon as it's up on the screen, as I mentioned, it's a 6-minute presentation time period. At the 5-minute mark, I'll gently remind you that you have a minute left. And as soon as the presentation's up on the screen, we can move forward.
Well, that's coming up. Leanne, will I have control?
If you want to share the screen, yes.
Or I'm sorry, I do not have the presentation at my fingertips. I thought it was submitted to you.
Sure, I can pull it up if you want me to do it. Just a sec.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no
It's
problem.
okay.
And while that's coming up, I should acknowledge I'm joined today by Marina Hofschild, who's a senior urban designer with our urban design unit. You may have seen her before.
Here we go. Okay, so 6 minutes, 5-minute mark, I'll break in. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next slide, please. Yes, we're dealing with the property at 20-22 Metropolitan Road. 20 Metropolitan Road is actually the rear portion of the property, and 20 Metropolitan Road is primarily the frontage. It has a site area of over 34,000 square meters. That's in excess of 8.5 acres. The current proposal has a variety of building types. We have one mid-rise 12-story building shown in pink, and 5 high-rise towers over base buildings ranging from 23 to 49 stories. The 23-story building is at the lower portion of the property adjacent to what is a proposed park on Metropolitan Road. The development is essentially a mixed-use development proposing a total FSI of 6.48 times the site area. And it will consist of a total GFA in excess of 167,000 square meters. Next slide, please. The site is indicated with the big yellow star. It is at the upper northwest corner of what is known as the Ellesmere Employment District. It is located within an employment area as designated on map 2 of the city's official plan. Next, please. The subject site is currently designated mixed-use official plan. Next, please. The subject site is currently designated mixed-use areas. It is the entirety of the red space highlighted on the diagram. It's kind of an unusual context, and in that it is flanked by general employment areas on the west side and to the south, and core employment areas immediately to the east and southeast. A little bit of background on that. We had a prior application, again, an official plan amendment only application on these lands by a prior owner back in 2013, and although city planning staff did not support the redesignation to mixed-use areas at that time, City Council saw fit to redesignate these lands to mixed-use areas through the municipal comprehensive review process that was concluded in 2013 and implemented through Official Plan Amendment 231. Next slide, please. This is just an aerial photo giving you some context. The property is outlined in red. To the north, we have the eastbound 401 on-ramp and the highway itself. To the immediate left, we have on the corner with Metropolitan Road and Warden Avenue, we have an office building. It's headquarters of the Salvation Army. And north of that, adjacent to the on-ramp, is the Toronto Chinese Methodist Church, and you'll see an expanse of employment uses to the south, southeast, and east of the property. And on the west side of Warden Avenue, we have the Maryvale low-density residential community. Next slide, please. This is just a little closer in aerial photo. You'll see on the north portion of the property is an existing aging hotel facility. It's been there for many, many decades, with a driveway access running down to Metropolitan Road. The balance of the frontage on Metropolitan Road is an expanse of currently vacant land. Again, I've pointed out the Salvation Army and the Toronto Methodist Church, and some of the names indicated on this photo will give you a sense of other primarily industrial operations in the immediate vicinity. Next, please. Just quickly, some shots. This is the entrance into the existing hotel facility, and the shot on the right shows the expansive vacant area fronting on Metropolitan Road to the upper right in that image. Next, please. This is a shot in the upper left of the 2-story Salvation Army office, and a shot of the parking lot, the expansive parking lot currently serving the Chinese Methodist Church. Lower left is a shot of, I believe, industrial uses on Metropolitan Road. I'm not quite clear where that one was taken. And lower right is a shot at the end of Metropolitan Road of a portion of what is a very sizable HBC distribution facility. I think it has in excess of 80 odd loading docks. It is one of the largest industrial structures in the city currently. And all that industrial truck traffic is utilizing Metropolitan Road as the sole means of ingress and egress for all that traffic, largely going out to Warden Avenue to connect with the 401. Next slide, please.
Rod, you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, I'm not going to go through this list in great detail, other than to say there is an awful lot of existing policies and guidelines in place that I'm sure you have gone through many times with other proposals. It's an extensive list, which will be guiding our continued review of the current application and the future site plan and subdivision applications. Next, please. I just want to point out site and area specific policy 458 in particular, because this really is what the official plan amendment is about. It's not to redesignate the lands to mixed use areas. We have that already. This was established through OPA 231 in 2013. We're having the discussion here today and through our continued review on item A to the development of a framework for the development of these lands. The first phase of redevelopment on the site is supposed to include replacement of the existing hotel with a 201 room hotel facility, which is part of the current application. Item C just speaks to the usual MOE guidelines on compatibility. And item D is really what we're talking about here, in that this development is not delivering 50% of the GFA as non-residential uses, of which at least 5,700 square meters was expected to be office uses. So that is the policy, the one aspect of this policy that this official plan amendment application is seeking to revise to reflect the current proposal. Next slide, please. I think we can skip the views given the time limitations. And what we are seeking this panel's feedback on and guidance on today is the integration of this site within its employment area context and its connectivity to the larger community. The public realm elements, including the new public street into the site, the proposed built form and its fit within the existing and planned context, and sustainable building and landscape strategies. Thank you.
My apologies there. I had a communication break. We can move on now to the consultant presentation. It can be pulled up on the screen. Thank you. And you'll have a total of 15 minutes. And at the 14-minute mark, I'll break in. The floor is yours. Hello, is somebody presenting?
Bonnie from our team is presenting.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Bonnie, are you, I think you're on mute. She dropped off. Derek, are you presenting? The presentation. Bonnie, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'll begin the 15 minutes now. Well, as soon as the presentation's up on the screen. Okay, great. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. This is Bonnie Chen from Settle & Architects. The agenda has two parts. We'll first describe the March submission on Metropolitan proposal, and we'll present a revised site strategy scheme based on the city comments that we received in August. This is a various site context plan on the proposed development. Transportation network, land use, site views, block context plan, and axonometric. Going back to the proposed development. This slide shows our thinking process behind to organize the site through road network in 5 different development phases based on uses and distribution of major public realm and open space, their locations of private roads and location of the new public road, and how it develops into street-related build form. This is a color site plan we submitted in March. The proposed mixed-use community at 22 Metropolitan Road consists of new condominiums and rental and street-related retail use, senior housing, office space, and a new hotel. The proposed development introduced a new public road called a Sunlight Boulevard that acts as a landscape spine to the mixed-use 5-tower and 1 mid-rise scheme, coupled with a central localized POPs and a new public park located along the gateway entrance fronting on 2 Metropolitan Road. The slide shows the facing plan and location in different outdoor spaces at and above grade. There feature public park, POPs, and various semi-public and public open spaces along Sunray Boulevard. The slide shows the intended activated frontage such as retail and entrances along Sunray Boulevard and the surrounding edges of the public park and POPs, which result in the diagram on the right, the pedestrian circulation pattern. The slide shows how the 3 private roads leading to the loading and parking entry for different blocks at the rearway away from the public street. To the right, it shows how the building uses related to the proposed private and public outdoor recreational areas on various levels. The slide shows the makeup of the different zones across the 18.5 wide boulevard, such as building setbacks, patios, planters, active and passive pedestrian zones, and different locations. This is an area view describing how the proposed building forms respect the existing and planted context of the surrounding area and how they transition to the existing neighborhood to the north and to the west, and also to the east and the south. The tallest view forms are located at the rear backing onto 4-1, gradually transition to mid-rise and to the public park along Metropolitan. The diagram shows a 45 angular plane compliance from residential neighborhood. This is a blow-up of the ground floor plan starting with the public park relating to the hotel office functions at grade from the landscape Sunray Boulevard. It shows how the back of house functions are hidden at the rear. Moving north along Sunray Boulevard into the feature POPs area, it shows how the different lobbies, retail, amenity drop-offs, and grade-related patios related to the different edges of the POPs and the various public space like the Healing Garden, various forecourts along the public street. Again, the service functions are internalized at the rear away from the public view. Similarly, at the rear, the focus on the pedestrian experience becomes more residential. With a widened crosswalk across the street to the POPs, a potential extension of the Sunray Boulevard to the east is anticipated, shall the block to the east be redeveloped in the future. This is an east elevation showing the space between the rental and condo transitioning from the podium down the street. This is the west elevation showing tower and podium transition at the condo, senior rental, and at the hotel office complex. The south elevation shows the spatial relationship between the hotel and the mid-rise rental across Sunray Boulevard. North elevation shows the tallest tower being at the rear backing onto 4-1. An overview of the development. This is our vision of the community along Metropolitan Road. We have incorporated a variety of architectural materials to create an interesting, cohesive, sheltered, and comfortable pedestrian experience at grade. And the design intended to provide a strong identity at the Sunray Boulevard frontage. Podiums are designed to provide a consistent street edge with appropriate setbacks, podium height responding to human scale, and lower and tower setbacks. As we walk into the site, we will see the hotel lobby, amenity, retail, and possible outdoor cafe patios greeting along the public park. Further on, we look towards the Healing Garden designed specifically for the senior living at grade. Moving north, next is the view of the meandering streetscape leading to the retail at grade, echoed by the landscape courtyard and architecturally articulated podium across the street, coupled with modern street lighting, outdoor furniture, continuous sidewalks, and landscape buffers. Next is a pedestrian view back to the hotel block. This is our vision of the POPs as an inclusive social gathering place for all ages and all age group to mingle and linger. You can see the POPs is addressed by various building entrances, public art, kid playing area, a dog run, and courtyard with various outdoor seating opportunities. Next is a pedestrian view from the cul-de-sac, looking at various podium characterized with recessed balconies, planting, covered with central entrances with the block street edges parallel to the street edge. A material palette which is consistent throughout the development. Based on the city comment received in August, we have quickly put together a revised site strategy focusing on improving the public realm with enhanced reblock connection, pedestrian network, cycling opportunities, and porosity throughout the site. First, by increasing the right-of-way from 18.5 meter to 21 meter and introduce 2 designated bike lanes as part of the cycling network. Increase the landscape buffer zone to a minimum of 3 meters on each side of the public right-of-way. We also increase the number of pedestrian crossings along Sunray Boulevard. Was a major key change to enhance the public realm is we doubled the POP size to over 2,000 square meters by relocating the private road originally between building C and D to the south of building C. The laneway will continue along the east edge of building C, D, and F, forming a full loop back to Sunray Boulevard. It is anticipated that the new pedestrian mid-block connection will continue to the neighboring properties shall be redeveloped. On the slide on the image on the right, the indoor amenity in all blocks are recommended and will be located to the upper podium levels and replace the grade-related retail with activated frontages surrounding the POPs, public park, and all street edges along Sunray Boulevard. We also reduce the depth and the length of the residential podium at the rear and free up more landscape space along Sunray Boulevard. In doing so, the tunnel space between the senior rental and condo podium is widened and thus reduce the negative wind effect at the pedestrian level. Towers have more step back from the podium in the area as a result. We also provide shorter urban drop-offs at the senior condo and the condominium base and relocated the rental drop-off to the new lane, which allows more continuous landscape shown along the street. The podium at building C, D, and F will be pulled away from the east to 12.5 meters from 6 meters and from 6 meters to 15 meters from the south to enable a proper transition into the existing employment area. All the loading, parking, entry of these buildings are also relocated to the east edge in response to the adjacent existing loading facility at the neighboring operations. On top of that, we have reduced the tower floor plate size in all blocks and increased the separation distance between the tower to a minimum of 30 meters. Underground parking will be pulled back 3 meters for open soil opportunity along the west edge of the site for tree planting purpose. Again, public art will be introduced as a community benefit. With that, I will turn over to our landscape architect to present his urban landscape vision.
Thanks, Bonnie. Can we go to the next slide, please? So, Bonnie, I think you've covered a lot of the public realm experience at grade. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to quickly go through the last 10 slides with some precedent imagery here. As Bonnie alluded to, there's quite a heavy residential feel here at grade level. And that's what we kind of want to depict as we go through from south to north. Granted that there's a hotel. on the way from south to north. So I want to actually draw attention to the very generous setbacks that have been provided, and that we bear in mind we are looking at the previous submission that has already been submitted in March. And I want to draw your attention to the very generous setbacks to the podiums, which Bonnie has said that gives very, very, very generous spaces for lots of tree planting and lots of open space, passive and active recreation. If we go to the next slide, please. So some of the movement through the site divided up into major pedestrian circulation on the sidewalk, and as we heard before, it's a typical 18.5 meter right of way, generous sidewalks up either side of that street, and then you have minor pedestrian circulation in through the open spaces, and again alluding to those setbacks that are vary in as a minimum 3 meters and open up to 13-15 meters in some spaces across the pops. If we go on to the next slide, please.
Sorry, I lost the slide for some reason.
Yeah, don't worry.
Oh, it's
There's
okay.
only a couple left anyway.
Oh, it's not loading. Great. There you go.
Right, so we've highlighted the open spaces here. Again, as you see, we've had some 3D imagery here of what potentially could be the programming there, starting from the healing garden in the middle image, and some of the pops potential programming from recreational play spaces, seating areas, communal areas for the residents, and again some of the hotel ground floor uses have been alluded to in the previous presentation. If we go to the next slide. Some of the efforts from traffic calming perspective that we are thinking through as we go forward through this application, and we want kind of to get in discussions with the city on this, fairly atypical arrangements that we are starting to see all over the city, and paved crosswalks, raised tables for traffic calming effect, because of the residential feel we want to portray here in this development. We think these are critical, and we're really looking for the city to get involved in these discussions and to kind of drive these concepts forward with us as we go forward through the process. Next slide. And again, as Bonnie alluded to, there are some challenges on the site in terms of wind. We outlined here in the different colours, the orange, the green and the blue, are those mitigation levels. Again, of course, we're seeing an industrial site to the right-hand side as we go up through from Metropolitan. So those are going to be heavily screened, and those screens are going to act as both visual buffers into the adjacent site and as wind mitigations. And the wind mitigation screens are at varying heights in accordance with the wind reporting. And next slide, please.
Ray, you have about a minute left.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's only a couple of slides left. So we have opportunities for public art, and again, we can talk through with the city, and that's our challenges and our opportunities with the city to talk through the future submissions is to where the best locations for those public art features may be at the end of vistas, in the middle of the pops, at the very beginning of the gateway feature, at the park entrance, at the very bottom of your page. So again, these are placeholders. We understand that they will be involved as we go forward, but just essentially these are some images of what you might expect to come in form of public art. And I'll briefly address some of the sustainability measures that we consistently work through in different applications in terms of pollinator species. But a large opportunity for green roof applications on this development. We will work through permeable paving solutions where there is opportunities to do that off slab. Bioswale rain gardens, again, we kind of work through the civil engineers on the best use and best locations of those. Green wall opportunities as well. And as we are seeing in the bottom right hand corner, stormwater management with our tree planting, even in the public right of way, is very much a strategy that the city are very welcome to getting involved in recent applications. And I think there's one slide. No, there's not. My apologies. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. Thanks to both of you for the presentation. We're going to move on to clarification questions from panel members to both the proponent team and city staff. Panel members, if you could raise your virtual hands as you're already doing. We're going to start with Joe and then Heather.
I have, I guess, maybe three questions. The first of which may not be a fair one to city staff, but I would appreciate, I find this project very puzzling. This kind of isolated pocket of incredibly high density in the middle of an employment area. What was City Council thinking when they approved the change to mixed use against staff recommendations? I imagine there was something behind that approval, and I'd like to understand, was City Council assuming this employment area is all going to transform? What's the big idea here that one could position this application in some kind of future planning context? I'm missing that. The second question is, what is the closest high order transit station to this site? How far away is it? Where is it located? And the third, to the applicant, why is the public park located at the south on Metropolitan Road and not in the heart of the community to benefit the residents in a more direct way? Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yes, through the chair to the member. It's difficult to really know what was in council's mind back in 2013, but my recollection of the proceeding at Planning and Growth Management Committee, as it was called at that time, it was motivated by the councillor of the day, who was quite excited to hear the original proposal included replacement of an aging hotel facility, which he thought would be a great boon for the city to have the site redeveloped with a new hotel as a means of providing some level of employment replacement. There was also an understanding and a requirement as reflected in site and area specific policy 458 that I mentioned, that there would be in excess of 11,000 square meters of office and retail and other business uses introduced to the site. That never proceeded through any kind of zoning approval process, but there was the expectation in that concept that there would be significant employment replacement, and council was content in its mind to also entertain the residential proposals at that time, which were significantly less than what we're seeing here. There were only 877 units proposed at that time, and about just under 70,000 square meters of residential use, significantly below the numbers we're seeing today. In terms of higher order transit, of course, we have that indicated on the slide up on Shepherd Avenue. So we're close to the, well, not terribly close to the terminus of the Scarborough subway, but the city certainly has plans to upgrade LRT service ultimately along Shepherd Avenue. That's many years down the road. You see Ellesmere Station on the RT to the lower right. Of course, the RT is now being shut down, and that particular level, or that particular service facility will be gone, is now gone. There will be the Asian Court GO station at the upper right for the Stouffville GO line, and that's in the process of being improved to double track and all day service up to Stouffville. Beyond that, I think it's the Warden Avenue bus down to the Warden subway station would be the next closest linkage to rapid transit.
Okay. Joe, does that answer your questions?
No, sorry. The final question to the applicant was the logic of the public park away from all the density along Metropolitan Road beside the existing employment uses.
Okay, right. And who can answer that?
I can maybe comment on that one. If so, from our original consultations and pre-consultations with the city before we went to work to put an application together, we did have the park actually where that 12-story apartment is, and then through the consultation, the city staff requested the park to be closer to Metropolitan for the access of public to the park for the future developments in the area on the south side, east, west, and they wanted people to have access to the park. And that's why we moved the park to the south based on the city staff's comment.
Okay, thank you. Joe, any other questions? We'll move on. Okay, we're going to move on to Heather, then Lydia, and then Michael. Heather, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just confirming that on page 34, addressing city comments, that all of those revisions have been made on the right-hand side. So the former programming for the buffet and multi-purpose hall is no longer at the ground floor of building 1, and that there's now retail.
Correct.
Yeah, and so something like the dog run that is shown on the left is no longer there on the right?
The dog run is going to be relocated and readjusted by the landscape architect, but this is still
Okay.
within the palms.
Okay, okay. And then your building A is office and hotel. I'm just wondering, when you look at the architectural expression, there's a kind of very transparent interruption about halfway up the tower. Just wondering if you could let us know what kind of programming is in that. Is that where the separation between office and hotel happens, or what is that about?
Correct. This is actually a sky lounge. Originally in consultation with our developer clients, this is going to be a amenity given to the hotel and the office. So this is again an indoor mingling floor for the different use within the same building.
And to answer your
Okay.
question, Heather, yes, that
Yeah.
is a separation. So hotel ends there, and then there's 5 floors of the office on top of that.
Okay. Okay, great. And then just based on some of the information we're hearing about 50% of the GFA not being residential, and you showing much more residential, I'm just wondering, has the team undertaken any kind of market study or reasons to support why not the employment use in this area?
Based on our, we own multiple hotels in the within short distance from this drive and offices, and based on the capacity, we thought that this was reasonable size. We've increased the amount of retail in the at the base of these buildings based on the new design that was shown on page 34, and we also have a retirement home which comes with 8 stories of extended care and assisted living. And then we have the independent living above that, which is sort of, it's a senior rental building, but really with full services from the assisted living section. And then inclusion of a rental building, we thought is a good mix for the area. And that's where the, I guess, discussion is with the city at that, how we can mix it up that benefits everyone. As far as the office space, we all know that the office space is not as popular these days, and we don't want buildings that are sitting empty and no one's leasing them. And we felt like this is a nice complete sense of community with the retirement home, the hotel. We do have 5 stories of office space on top, with one of the floors will be designated as a office space, shared office space, so people can rent space. And we assume people that live in those condos, and if they want to have a small, the accountants, the architects, and people that the startups, they can just rent that shared space from us. And then, of course, we increase the retail at the bottom. So I think the numbers are higher than the original package that we submitted based on these revisions in the past few weeks.
Okay.
I'm not sure where the exact numbers are at. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, everybody. We're going to move on then to Eladia, then Michael and Paul.
Curious about, I have, I think 3 questions, but I think they're fast. Is the public park going to remain mowed lawn?
As in like a grass, real grass, you mean?
I mean, right now it's mowed lawn with a few scattering of trees. Is that pretty much how it's presented to remain in this development? Are there any plans for the public park to be anything other than just a mowed strip of empty lawn?
So is this a question to the city staff?
Like, I guess it's given over to public use, so public would have to develop it. There's nothing that this development is proposing to do with it other than leave it empty.
Okay. Rod, would you be able to provide some input on this?
Well, a lot of that will be determined through the zoning and particularly the subdivision process. The city expectation with any subdivision would be at minimum that the lands be delivered in base part condition. So they would be expected to be delivered basically in a sodded condition with servicing installed in terms of water service to the park, et cetera. And that's typically going to be a requirement prior to first above grade permit or first occupancy of one of the buildings. We're simply not there yet in the process. In terms of getting to above base park improvements, that's a further negotiation we would have with the owner through the rezoning process to see if those could be incorporated as in-kind contributions to their obligations, because we can no longer apply Section 37 to secure those particular kinds of improvements. We simply haven't had that level of discussion yet with the applicant.
And if I may add a comment, Rod, if you don't mind for me to add to what you said, we are planning on moving our actual head office to that office building. So we do have great interest in, and we're going to have our flagship hotel in that space, and we're going to own that retirement home there and the rental building. So we do have great interest in having a nice park beside our hotel and head office, and definitely for the project as a whole. So we work with the city on that to see how that will come about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question. There's a lack of clarity what's retail and what's not on the ground level. Like, for example, on one slide, it shows 3-bedroom coded pink for retail. So I'm really not clear what's intended for the retail uses. Is there any sort of logic to how they're sprinkled about the development?
So in terms of the retail, I will refer to the last slide based on the city comment and how we relocate all the retail at grade. And starting with the hotel portion, we're having the retail just like what we talked about, the cafes and patios fronting onto the public park. And there will be some areas for hotel and office lobby at grade. There will be 2 cheeks at the base of the senior rental that at the base, there will be retail sort of hugging along some way boulevard. But we also am planning to introduce is around the Pops area where they used to be amenity spaces at the grade, and we actually changed it into like a neighborhood retails and sort of strengthen the enlarged area of the Pops by also offering retail on the south edge or the what we call the north side of the rental building at grade.
Okay, so just to confirm, slide 18 is the slide that confused me because I'm seeing maybe it's showing another level, perhaps. So this slide is more accurate.
Slide 34 is the revision, Ladia. So that we revise it as per city's comments. So
okay, so slide 18 is obsolete.
That's right. It's the one on the right though. This is the newer one that we're proposing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does that answer your questions, Aladia?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Michael and then Paul.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think it's a question for the proponent, and just there's quite a few buildings. There are quite a few different street conditions. I wondered, is there an intent to have a kind of a clear set of principles that would guide the development so that this public street, is a complete street, that it has a kind of recognizable continuity of materiality, planting, built form. I know that you have indicated some street sections, but those don't necessarily represent the vast opportunities that are here. So is that something that is still being planned, or is what we're seeing the result of a strategy that maybe hasn't been articulated in the document.
So, Michael, I just want to be, this is Bonnie, I just want to be clear, you're looking for the more comprehensive strip sections with a new 21-meter right-of-way, or you're looking for a sort of the extension of that right-of-way further into the neighborhood as part of the sort of the network of extension of roads?
I guess I'm just thinking that when you look at this plan, you can see some buildings are close to the street, some buildings are at an angle to the street, some buildings are set back from the street, some buildings are quite far set back from the street, and so the formation of the street, whether through continuity of material, street plantings, or built form, would. I'm just wondering whether you're feeling like there's a system that's there and we need to detect what it is, or whether it's still emergent.
Okay, so what we, I think we go back to the locations of POPs that we are anticipated to put in the center of the neighborhood here, where we talk about the sort of outdoor social gathering place. And this is our intent to have over 2,000 square meter of POPs sort of located, to the west of the condo, to the north of the rental, but sort of across the street facing the senior rental, becomes sort of like a mixed sort of inner community on their own that they can share is our intention. I think that's also result in the different setbacks you're looking at why some of the buildings are further away from the public boulevard is because of the centralized larger scale POPs in the middle. It's like a central park.
Yeah, I jump in there, Bonnie, as well from a landscape perspective, Michael, just to clarify some of the materiality and plantings questions. So, I mean, as you're well aware, probably there's a new model of public ground design coming out of the city in terms of workshops, and we're very happy to work through the future submissions during those workshops about what exactly happens on the public ground. This is a site organization diagram you're looking at. It's not a street, particularly a street design diagram you're looking at, and I think for too long the city streets have been following the one standard design, and we're quite welcome those workshops that most likely will happen with the city about experimenting or kind of changing up a different vision for our streets in Toronto in terms of the detailing and materiality. So yes, this is not a streetscape design you're looking at, but through the process that will be fleshed out.
If it's okay, Mr. Chair, one last question. The road terminates at a roundabout, at a turnaround. Was there ever any considering that the lands to the east are not likely to be developed anytime soon, was there any consideration of creating a focal point of some kind or a termination at that location?
I think with the sort of revised road network that is presenting on the screen right now is that we're going to introduce sort of a linkway sort of at the end here to make it a loop street. And so this area here will be some sort of termination that will be subject to a discussion with the developer and the landscape architect in the city to come with something that's attractive until the interim conditions is being transformed when the next door neighborhood is developed.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, if I may add, Mr. Chair, apologies. I think there is also maybe a larger plan with the city that with the potential development of the properties to the east, whether that's a year from now, 10 years from now, I'm not sure. But the idea is for that Sunray Boulevard, as we call it, it will loop around back into onto Metropolitan at some point. And I think we saw that from the city that's how they envisioned it.
Okay, thank you for that information. Michael, any other questions? No. And then the final, excuse me, final questions from Paul.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could flip, I think it's slide 39, so just a couple down here. I'm curious, sort of similar to Eladia's point, is understanding some of the ground floor changes. It's further down, one of the ones that showed screening and grade changes. I think it was 39. Yeah, that one. There we go. Could you just clarify what's happening along the edge of the hotel parcel in particular? There's showing a grade change. Could you describe what that is? Which part is higher versus lower? What a 2.5 meter windscreen looks like right opposite, immediately south of the building, but then in front of the hotel. And then the sort of triangular piece of the park that's variously shown as a park, but also an event space. If you could just clarify what the intent is there. So that's the piece on the northwest of the park, I guess. Thank you.
I just addressed the windscreen. Your question was, what does the windscreen look like? A 2.4 meter high windscreen, what it looks like? Just clarify that, Paul.
I mean, more specifically, what it would look like, maybe 2-3 meters from the hotel facade up against a park, what the intent is there, because I've also seen that described as retail. I think we're just lacking clarity around that edge of park hotel interface.
What you're seeing here is the previous. I don't, Bonnie, I'm going to let you speak to the new design. I guess what we're looking at here is the old, where the old hotel ground floor function has been updated now. So again, there is no event space proposed for the parkland. Everything's proposed within the private lands here, and will be in this particular. In this particular diagram, we're looking at from the ground floor functioning was from a hotel functioning. So we were looking for that privacy and that wind comfort element here, and then we were working through various options of incorporating the Sunray logo into the different types of branding and design within all the vertical and maybe horizontal and the paving structures, as you see from the 3 images on the right hand side. So again, as we work through the design, we will see the balance of those kind of fall out, through when we get the detailed sections of the elevations of the buildings and the interface to the park. We will be balancing those out with, if the concern is the 3 meter high metal structure, I mean, of course, there will be a balanced kind of ground floor planting scheme that will hide the bottom meter of that. So concerns are noted. Again, a lot of that detail to be worked through as the site plan emerges.
And sorry, if you could just clarify the grading condition between the park and the hotel ground plane.
Bonnie, can I hand that over to you?
Yes, I think the particularly grade change is actually happening at the back when there is a significant grade change where my pencil is. The grade change is actually a gradual, like a 2%, 3% going this way. I don't think you necessarily have a huge grade change at this full line here. I just want to clarify that. The windscreen is a different thing based on the wind study that they talk about that is going to blow into the open area. So it's subject to a further study. Now we have a revised design of the area, so that the sort of windscreen element is mostly on the west side that we're talking about. The wind blow this way, a little bit that way, and so that windscreen element is going to be lower on this side. But I don't think there's necessarily a great change right at the edge of the public park to the hotel. The grade change is actually gradual. It's not a wall. The wall is at the back here, where I have a senior healing garden, sort of much higher up than the hotel drop-off area where you see the Sunday group on the right. Yeah.
Paul, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, I believe Eladia had some comments in the chat.
I know, and I'm just going to break in for a second. We've got a lot of questions here, and we haven't even gotten to the discussion part of our agenda yet. I've got Eladia and I've also got Joe.
I just have a short factual one, Gordon. Apologies.
Okay.
How many units, how many cars are being parked? Parking count and unit count. Thank you, if possible. Apologies, Gord.
Okay, and if somebody needs to look that up, I'm just going to ask Eladia. Eladia, you said you had 3 questions. Are they short or not? Otherwise, can you form them into comments? when we get to discussion. Is that possible?
I can answer the unit question here. So the total number of units will be, let's look at the market rated residential condo will be 1,000 units. Then there will be, 1,450 units. And then the rental portion is going to be around 210. Senior living is 384. Hotel would be 204. Totaling 2,252, including a majority of those will be senior, rental, and hotel. Parking is going to be approximately 1,300 total of all the phases. 2 levels underground and grade, consistent with that.
So
I'm sorry, Gord, I didn't quite hear the parking number. Is
Okay.
there a, I'm sorry, could you be clear about if there's over 2,000 units plus or minus, roughly how many cars is it, are you anticipating in those 2 levels?
It's going to be approximately 13, it's going to be 0.4 to 0.5, sorry, excuse me. It's 1,300 parking. 1,300 parking.
1300.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay.
I'm sorry for the break-in, Gord. Thank you.
That's okay. Back over to Aledia. I know you had sent me some more questions. Can they be handled as comments during the discussion period?
I think they're just yes or no questions. So does the project have sustainability goals beyond base level compliance? And are there plans to address lack of connectivity to transit? Is there some mechanism by which proponent can plan for that or not?
So what I'm going to suggest, if this is okay with you, if you could bring those up during our discussion. I'm getting an unusual number of questions, and I realize it is due to the nature of the project and wanting to get more information. But if you bring those up during the discussion period, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Gordon, it's Ralph. Just a question for you. Is this an OP rezoning? I just forgot. Somebody
I understand that it's OPA.
Okay.
And Rod Hines can provide more information if necessary, but I think that's what I understand it is specifically at this point.
Currently, it's just an OPA.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to suggest is that we're going to move on to discussion. I'm going to suggest we got 10 people. If you self-manage your time to 2 minutes each, if we have a little bit of time left over at the end, we'll come back to it, but I would say 2 minutes per person. And again, I apologize for cutting questions short. It's only because there are so many of them, and I think they can be reworded as comments about things that need to happen in the design as we come to the individuals. The order will be Juhi, Joe, Anna, Paul, Ralph, Aledia, Olivia, Heather, Jessica, and Michael. And we'll start with Juhi.
Thank you. I do think sort of a lot of the questions sort of reflects what the package that was sort of in front of us. I think overall there were good intention and starting points, but they were not well articulated in its application, and it was really hard to understand it as a package. While I'm in support of a high density in general, I do question how much was squeezed into this small site. I appreciate the mitigation studies, the public art and the stormwater and permeability approach that have been identified, but the current submission is starting to look at sustainability from landscaping perspective, but given that this is a high density development with 5 towers, it is really critical that it starts to look at other criteria such as energy, water, and carbon reductions. And I guess just look at the sort of where I was having a hard time drawing whether what was being presented was actually implemented. It's not clear whether the POFs and the private-only owned open space is sufficient for the density that you're proposing, especially the POF space appear to have more opportunity for activation and design. For example, like the images of the public art and sustainability opportunities on page 40 and 41 are really grand in gesture, but when I look at the suggested rendering on page 37, it was really hard to connect how they would fit into the current suggested space and the renderings. And I understand that these are in discussions with the city, but I would really encourage for the project team to propose a relentless vision for these public spaces so that, you know, in a way right now, the package feels a little bit passive to me. One last comment, I think, again, to the disconnect on page 33, where the diagram shows an emphasis on primarily pedestrian walkways and bike lanes. But again, like because of the scale of the road, I have a hard time really thinking that the bike lanes will be able to go through such a tight space. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Juhi. Moving on to Joe.
Thank you, Gord. It feels to me like this proposal's a bit of like going back in time, back in time to a time when we created isolated residential communities in the sort of middle of nowhere with a complete car dependency. It feels to me like an isolated pocket of very high density in the midst of a large long-term employment area that is unlikely, excuse me, to transform anytime soon. And it appears inevitably to be a complete car-dominated environment, the huge dependence on massive amounts of underground parking, which is going to have a giant carbon cost. The embodied carbon in this project, I can't imagine. Hence my question about what was City Council thinking, and I appreciate the efforts of this proponent and this team coming along based on what was done before, but I don't get it. I don't get the sense that there's any potential of connectivity, a network, the development of a complete community over time. I get the idea of, you know, a new hotel would be very positive for the community and very good. I'm puzzled by the location of open space, the amount of it, given the density that's proposed. I'm puzzled, but to me, the windscreens that are on the table are a telltale. They're a telltale of a project that has serious difficulties, and so windscreens that separate buildings from parks aren't a good solution. They seem to be like an indication of larger problems with the overall development. And I think, you know, I mean, another thing that I find odd is we've already got a material palette, but the vision isn't there yet. So there are a number of disconnects with the project. I'm finding it very hard to understand the concept and the vision. It's not making sense to me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Anna.
Hi, thanks. Well, just to continue on with the thought that Joe started there, you know, this project doesn't make sense to me either, and I'm struggling to find something to attach to provide some kind of reasonable commentary on. It seems like it's in a very unusual place, and given that you would think that it would be designed as a complete community with a vision and a structure and organizational idea on how it can function in this very unusual place. And I think that's just completely missing from this. It's all focused on this street. The street seems to be there just to carry you through to the end where there's a dead end, you know, and so you come back out, everybody drives home at night, goes to, you know, goes home and then gets back in their car the next day and drives to where they're going. So I think that's, there really needs to be some thought around how this is a community. The park to me is a missed opportunity. It could be an organizational factor in this development, and you know, it's kind of pushed to the outer edge of the site. The seniors complex, I think, is another missed opportunity. I think that's a wonderful part of any community, and I think there's lots of opportunity to attach, you know, other uses to that type of building, healthcare uses, you know, healthcare offices, those kinds of things that can really start to activate it, you know, the community on its own. The retail portion could be another organizational factor. I don't think it's very realistic the way it's designed now. the scale of those units seem to be just kind of leftover spaces. They're not really designed as retail spaces. And, you know, there could be an opportunity for a grocery store or food uses. And, you know, when I look at how those spaces are configured and where they are on the site, it doesn't make sense. So I think this project needs a story and a reason for being. And, you know, I just don't see it yet. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. Paul, and then Ralph.
Yeah, I think I share everyone's maybe struggles in sort of commenting on something that just seems really out of place, but is approved as far as a use, and so we're kind of forced to talk about the details when the main issue of kind of suitability of this amount of density away from transit and away from amenity is kind of off the table theoretically. I did a couple quick looks beyond, and the closest school is over a kilometer east or west of here. The next school up is 1.5 kilometers, and so on. So you sort of get the picture, and you can imagine any children living here having to cross Warden, walk along Warden at the approach to the highway back and forth. And so I think for this to be a serious proposition, you have to start drawing the site plan and considering things beyond the immediate property. And that's sort of one of the reasons I started poking at the edges of the perimeter and the retaining walls. You've got a giant church and a parking lot to one side. You've got a Salvation Army. And if you look at the way the overlay of those properties are, that property and the proposed park is taking all of their parking immediately in front of that Salvation Army, leaving a 5-meter drive aisle with a 1-meter sidewalk and no landscaping in front of the building. I mean, it's not a tenable condition, and then it only kind of gets worse as you start to turn the corner and face windscreens and all sorts of things. So I think for this to be real, it needs a zoom out and then a credible story about how this could happen if we are truly committed to this being mixed use and stuck with it. I think it needs to address how children cross Warden. I think it needs to address how people negotiate all the trucks driving up and down Metropolitan to and from the viable jobs that are very real to the east. And then inside the site, I'm also struggling with the park location, and I'm really tempted to simply flip the park, and I think it's Block D. So you end up with a park that's really at the heart of everything. Seniors can walk out into the park. You can maybe cut short your street by about 50 to 100 meters perhaps, so it gets just far enough to service the last block, and then you can have a true community center at the very least in the middle of it. And if you start to think of some of the planned high-rise communities along, I'm thinking like 427 East Mall, West Mall, the things that happened along there of this scale were blessed with at least a large amount of green space. So you're up against the highway, but you're part of a network that gets you to and from amenities beyond, and then yet the part of it you've got a green space. I think some version of that needs to be crafted, because at the moment it seems isolated, disjointed, and in some cases sort of hostile to 3, 4, 5,000 people that may be living and visiting here. So I think it needs a step out to really start to address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. On to Ralph.
Thank you, Gord. So I mean, I have a bit of a provocation, which is to say that, and again, working out here, working with city staff out here, so kind of know the landscape a bit. And my provocation is that there's a large employment land area. And I know it sounds crazy, but I do think that there's a sustainable argument to be made to put intensive housing in walking distance or cycling distance to a very large employment lands. The whole site is surrounded by single family homes. There's not an apartment kind of within a kilometer probably of this part of the employment lands. And I think to actually support employment lands, we should look at maybe, I'm going to say, relatively affordable housing compared to single family homes that might be in walking distance. And I'm saying that because it's kind of interesting, notwithstanding all the kind of other concerns about cars and transit and all that. But the bizarre thing here is that the city, threw you a bunch of lemons and said, well, there's going to be some mixed use here. So it doesn't really matter whether there's 100 unit or 1,000 units or 2,000 units. There's going to be people living here. And I think, if I can say, we have unbelievably talented staff. I have the wounds that are just healing from dealing with them. They are great representatives of the city, and you have a landowner and, I'm going to say, very well-respected commercial developer, operator of an important part of mixed use, which is a hotel. But I was completely dumbfounded by the questions that were being asked. It was like, everybody's being so polite. The reality is the plan is horrible. It's horrible because it's this kind of weird aberration that you're shoving into it. And I implore city staff and the developer to step back from this precipice and work together, because I do believe that there is a great solution. I do believe you can put more density on this site. I do believe that you can kind of create a neighborhood that actually is going to be a really great place to live, close to potential employment for people that really need to be there. I think the city should look past this site to the site south of it, or the square that's kind of missing on the plan, and the easy sites adjacent to it, a church with a large parking lot and some low-hanging fruit storage and a kind of mediocre office building that's hidden behind it, and make a plan that includes all those properties. If you do that, I think it just opens everything up to a really potential good future where you can actually put retail that's going to fail in the right spot, and Anna could get a food store, and you can get amenities, and you can get public community space in a larger setting. I think you can kind of create a complete neighborhood that, if you open up the road at whatever it's called, Willow, whatever, at Warden, could easily connect the neighborhood to the west. I just think we need to kind of stop being polite and just say, guys, we need to rethink this and pull back. I think the park is in the worst spot possible. It goes through, then you go through a sausage grinder to try to get to all this density that just looks like it's shoved in. I think building C should be where the park is, that then the site south of it could actually double it, or add it, and then the park, the site east of it, could actually triple it, and you then have a central park and then a road network that use up and then come back down to Montgomery. You don't even need to go to the large distribution center to the east of that. I think there's enough site to kind of create something kind of real. And I'm not saying this, maybe this logically doesn't sound right in a kind of structure that we exist within the city, but the council kind of threw open the Pandora's box, and I think it behooves us to become city builders here and think about, maybe there's a narrative that can be made about supporting employment lands, creating affordable housing, bringing seniors, but create a real community and not try to just shove a square peg into a round hole. And I think I'm going to support extra density. I'm going to support the mixed use. I applaud the rebuilding of a hotel, but please pull back and the city work together to really create a really unique and great solution to the kind of conundrum that we're all in. Thanks.
Thank you, Ralph. Aladia.
Hi, thanks for bringing this forward to the panel. If we see this project again, it would be great to have a cohesive set that has internal cohesion. So it is quite difficult to comment when there's a lot of conflict within the site, the different set of drawings. So please, if we do see this again, just delete slides that are wrong, if you would, please. And I think I won't belabor the points that have already been made. I think they are all quite valid, and I agree with what's been said. With Ralph, I think rental must be built, and density does need to be achieved, even in pockets such as this. However, to be successful, which is what everyone wants, the onus is upon the developer to ensure that what they are proposing will work for the neighborhood. So there must be a mechanism whereby the lack of connectivity to transit is addressed. I don't know how that happens, whether there's some sort of like an in-kind donation, I don't know, or working with city to be able to establish a commitment to develop transit, because this will not work as presented. It does not acknowledge anything beyond the property line. So the realities beyond the property line are realities, and your set of buildings here does partake of the city at large. So we have to see how you are making it work with the city as a whole, which includes certainly transit and definitely sustainability. I've heard nothing regarding the sustainability goals of this very significant project. So we have to hear that. Why should we support this if it's just going to contribute to the continual downslide of the planet? So I think affordability is also a really big concern. Somebody who's working at one of the businesses that I see along this stretch is not going to be able to afford anything other than an affordable unit. So, you know, somebody working at a storage facility isn't going to be able to necessarily afford market rent. So what is the percentage of affordable units versus market rate units that we are seeing here? There has to be a commitment that is shared with the panel regarding that. I think the commitment to open space is currently not resolved. So the POPs is crisscrossed by all sorts of conflicting pedestrian routes, kind of just tucked there in a leftover space. There's not really a design consideration for how it supports retail or anything else, really. It's just a series of pathways that intersect and desire lines that conflict. So I am not seeing any kind of a logic to how things are laid out. That comment on the POP kind of applies to all of the quote unquote open spaces. So there's like a combination of super narrow spaces, really wide spaces, very paved spaces, spaces that are just left as giant open green spaces. So there's no kind of logic to how the public realm is going to be hospitable to human or other life. So I think that retail, even if we provide it, will just die. There's so many dead-end pedestrian routes that don't link up with a reason for a pedestrian to travel down that path, or even a path that is attractive to a potential pedestrian. And certainly the wind screens are a very brutal response to what is a very real problem. But yeah, zoom out, figure out what the realities are around and how this could actually be a good and successful and vibrant place. That remains completely unresolved to me. So I have difficulty even, commenting, and all of the slides don't match each other. So it's even harder. So anywho, thanks for bringing this forward, and definitely I think Ralph's comment to the city, perhaps give them a little more land so that they can actually make something happen here, is not a bad comment, because like it throttles there at the property line, and essentially what the designer did was let's offset the property line and stick buildings in that offset, which is just kind of an expression of giving up to me. So yeah, thank you for presenting this, because then we can give you feedback and hopefully it'll come back with something that's feasible.
Thanks, Olivia. Olivia, and then Heather.
Thank you. I'm just going to quickly agree with Olivia. It was a bit frustrating to review this package. There's the one drawing that had been updated recently. I think it was page 33, and then the rest of it, I mean, we're sort of reviewing two different projects here. So I think that the timing was just a bit unfortunate in that regard. I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made. So I'm just going to build on that by commenting how this plan was developed, because I think the graphics really show that it was developed with just this site on the page and nothing beyond it. So I think, thank you, Paul, for starting to map out the schools. That's the exercise that really needs to be done, right? Like, what is this community? Where are people going to school? Where are the community centers? Where are the other parks? And then we start to get a picture of how, if and how this site might connect to the wider site. But that's just really missing right now. And then that 3-meter high windscreen just caps it all and makes us feel really like a gated community. Also, I think that the new roadway that's wrapping around the east side of the development is kind of further isolating this community. Even as a car-centric community, I think it's not even working that way. Like, you enter the one road and then you have to drive all the way around to get into your parking lot. So I think neither of those aspects, driving or transit, are really working here. Agree with the other comments that the green space really needs to be central to this vision. The park feels like an appendage right now. But I think, like, an overall study of the green space and what it's doing for the community is really important. And I'm going to highlight the senior living community, because that has specific requirements for what the green space is. And I'm not sure that's being worked out successfully right now. And that's really important. Like, right now, it seems to be facing a retail block, and it's in the location where you said the strongest winds are facing. So I think that's really unfortunate. I think that's a really great program to introduce to the site, but it's not successful right now, and that's so important. And then finally, building on the sustainability strategies, because we are looking at a senior development, just some more thought into greater sustainability and resilience. So what's going to happen to these seniors during a power outage who are living on the 20th floor? I think some more long-term thinking and planning is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. On to Heather, then Jessica and Michael.
Thank you. I think a common theme of the comments so far is that this project has a lot of the right ingredients, but the way that it's been planned needs to be revisited. And so, I was asking the question about a market study, and with respect to the amount of residential gross floor area that was proposed, and I was actually quite encouraged by the answer that I received. That additional description about seniors living and assisted living gives a kind of window into the potential of this community for aging in place and other good aspirations that is not present in the package. So I think also the idea of building masses that get taller towards the highway is something that is a good takeaway here. I agree with that as a kind of reaction to the general deployment of density. I do agree that delivering the public park in the first phase of development is a good thing for this development. Whether the park is in the right location is something I think you've heard commentary from other panel members. I think there needs to be a higher degree of study there. I appreciate all the pedestrian eye-level perspectives, interior to the project itself, but this is also a highway side building, and the presence of it and the experience, the drive-by experience of tall buildings is something that's I think quite important, and that could be how this this project is most viewed. So I would encourage, again, I guess, a bit of a zoom out and some additional perspectives there. In the proposed street section, the 21-meter right-of-way, I do like the separation of walkways from patios. Because in some areas of our city, I actually find that quite awkward. What I don't understand about it is the two separate sidewalks. So I think that the right-of-way dimension could be relooked at, giving, we shouldn't be proposing something at the expense of bicycles, but there are some positive things about that. I do like the punctuations of public art within the proposed landscape plan. And I think that this is a good ingredient for placemaking, but you're hearing from the other panel members, and I agree that much more work is needed in this regard about creating a sense of place. The parkland dedication, I believe, is at 9.6%. I think that that's not high enough for this neighborhood. It should be at least 10 and closer to 15. I agree with Ralph and others. I think that the replacement of the hotel is great. And yeah, I think with respect to the architectural articulation of phase one, I think there are some bits of the architecture that are valuable, and I appreciate this idea of a kind of veil. I appreciate the kind of mid-tower interruption with a very kind of transparent use. So those moves, I think, also are appreciated, and I just wanted to mention something about the architectural expression that was put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I'm going to move on to Jessica and then Michael.
Thanks. Thank you for your presentation. I too struggled with the package and understanding the overall vision for this very sort of car-dominated pocket surrounded by employment lands. As others have said, the lack of community amenities and the lack of higher order transit is just a huge concern for the number of people expected to occupy the site. I agree with Joe. It's kind of puzzling. In terms of, a site this size, I would like to see sort of more of a strategic approach to the sustainability story related, to this density. So, establishing that early is really the way to make it meaningful impact. Contextually, I feel like the March submission doesn't integrate well with the employment area context. The rendering on page 25-28 doesn't quite illustrate the true context of a low-rise industrial building interfacing with the site. The sort of large windscreen kind of is running right down the center of the perspective. So it sort of doesn't truly illustrate that adjacency. And then there's just not enough material to comment on how the revised architecture would integrate with context. In terms of some of the boulevard improvements that you talked about and updated us on, I'm glad to see that there's some movement there and certainly movement away from what was looking like a very bleak sort of sidewalk experience without a buffer zone. But I would also expect that this new street would be designed to incorporate City of Toronto Green Street standards and all of the benefits that come with those in terms of stormwater management. And then I would just also suggest, looking at how the sidewalks terminate at Metropolitan Road. There's currently no sidewalk on the north side of that right of way. So right now the sidewalks sort of terminate into a roadway. So like kind of as Paul was getting at, zooming out and really looking at how people might move beyond the property line is really, really critical. And then I agree with many that the park isn't in the best location and feels rather left out. Very little connection or interface with the new residents. And then the final comment is just about a lot of the public realm being, it's on private property. But in a lot of cases, it's relying on retail to activate it, at least in the revised plan. And, there'll be great demands put either on retail tenants or condo boards to maintain these areas. And if maintenance fails or retail doesn't activate it, this could tarnish your vision of what these spaces, what your intention was. So, perhaps looking at other uses, maybe some more community uses and different adjacencies to help vary that ground floor offering could better support these sort of pop spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And on to Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So many great comments that I fairly agree with. Maybe only a few to wrap up. I mean, I think looking at the plans of the hotel that was there before, in some ways it was recognizing what the circumstance was. There was a road that left Metropolitan, or a driveway that left Metropolitan Road, lined by a park that arrived at a courtyard. And it was, and so it was a bit of an oasis. And so there's something about the notion that this place, when successful, will feel like an oasis in a relatively inhospitable area, a very inhospitable area, number one. And the second was legible, continuous streetscape. So if you had a sense of oasis when you were there, and you had legible, continuous streetscape, you would feel like you were arriving at a place that had a clear character, and I think we're all hopeful that that's the possibility. Looking at your drawing on page 12, there's an inferred large sort of C shape on the upper left corner, and an inferred sort of L shaped on the bottom right corner of the upper site. Even simplifications like that recognize that this is one place. It needs few gestures. It needs to be clear. Those might be the sources of a continuous legible streetscape and sense of oasis that I think could be achieved and create a really attractive living circumstance here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel members for the comments. And before calling the vote, I'm just going to try to catch some of those. And usually when we have a review, we have a handful of key things that we look at, and it can be context, site design, built form and articulation, sustainability, things like that. But we do see from time to time projects like this where there is such a set of circumstances that have led to the design that is being put forward, and the team that has been designing on this, we can see that there's been a lot of work that's been done. We can see that the site is very challenged, not only in its shape, but where it's located. We can see that all of the things that you wish to put into this site, the mix of uses, is of value, but that it truly is, and people have used the word island very, very accurately. This is a place that is, in a sense, completely at odds with many of the uses that are around it. And those uses do not appear to be ones that are going to change anytime soon. So the only thing that I've got on my page here is completely rethink, and in brackets, everything. And then around that are a series of bubbles of the things that need to be done. And they're not insurmountable. It's just that that out of all this, I think many of the comments that have come through, that there's possibility. So it's on one hand, and when I'm looking at this site, I'm thinking of Consumers Road, which is not too far away, and looking at that as individual sites. And then finally, there was, I believe, a secondary plan. There was something that set out an overall vision for a place that really, correct me if I'm wrong, never really had residential there before. And yet, with that bigger vision, there was the ability to put the sites that we saw individually into context, much as we have a strong desire to try to achieve that here. So that's on one hand, under complete rethink. There is as much on the city's side as there is on the proponent side in that particular sense. The park location has been mentioned. Less density, serve the uses to a better degree, make sure that they are livable uses, the amount of giving them enough space to have sufficient amenities. all of these things will create a better place, but it will also create a more marketable place. And the comment about, think about the existing uses and how can this residential mix serve that use, which is so close at hand. The complete community, researching the needs that your uses have and see if they're out there in the community, the broader community. And if they're not, either that use doesn't make sense to be there, or it provides an opportunity for you to try to create that on the site. So I'm not going to go into any further detail. I think really everything comes down, and the reason why we've taken more time on this is because we're puzzled. It's a giant puzzle that we're trying to make sense of, and really it needs to be at the city level and at the proponent level rethought. So we're going to call for the vote now, and Leanne, if you could pull the voting description up on the screen. What you should be seeing, this is the first review, so it's a first review vote. And we usually vote either for support or non-support. With support, at times there can be key conditions applied to that. So conditions in terms of voting for support. My sense is that there's so many comments that have come through that there are some pretty fundamental changes, but I will ask the panel, are there any brief conditions that would be applied to a vote of support? And I'm not seeing any hands or any comments. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the vote, and as I go through and call your name, please tell me whether you're voting for support or non-support. And we'll start with Jessica.
Non-support.
Juhi?
Non-support.
Thank you. Heather?
Non-support.
Michael?
Non-support.
Thank you, Michael. Joe?
Non-support, just with a brief comment, appreciated Ralph's suggestions. Thank you.
Great. Ralph? Are you there, Ralph?
I really want to support, but I cannot support.
Okay. Olivia?
Non-support.
Paul?
Support.
Thank you. Anna?
Non-support.
Aladia?
Non-support.
Support. Okay. So voted. Are there any panel members out there that I've missed? No? Okay, so voted. Please remember that the vote is only one part of all the comments that have come in. And I think in some of those comments, there's been great hope that with reevaluating the site, that the true possibilities of the site and the uses that you want to put into it will start to come into sharper focus. Thank you very much. Panel members, we are behind schedule. So Leanne, is the next group, the last group, ready to present?
Yes, they're in the lobby.
Okay, I'm going to suggest a 5-minute break. I apologize for it being short, but 5-minute break and we will start. Let me see. Let's say 4:45. We'll start at 4:45. Thanks very much. Thank you to the proponent team. We look forward to you coming back again.
Gordon, sorry, I have to excuse myself for the last session.
Okay, thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
Yep, me too, Gordon. I sent you a message. Leanne knows. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Jessica.
Hi, Gordon. Sorry, still here.
Okay, I know that you, I have you marked down as perhaps needing to leave early as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, I just sent you a chat there. Yeah, and Leanne knows as well.
Okay, so I'll say goodbye to you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. We'll see you later.
And thank you for all your input. As
Hey,
always.
Gord,
It's
it's
great.
Ralph.
Take care.
Hello, Ralph.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going okay.
I'm getting grumpier and grumpier.
Oh no, don't do that. We're supposed to be more and more, what's the word? Engaged and excited about life as we get older.
Well, I was definitely excited.
Well, these are interesting
Engaged.
projects. This
Oh,
is a
man.
great city. This is a great city.
Yeah. Hey, Rod, I hope you don't mind. I don't have that many.
I was just responding to you, Ralph, that was
Oh, you were?
incredibly fast.
And just to keep you to remind you, we are
I know,
being streamed.
being screened. Yeah, no problem.
So I'm gonna go and get a cup of coffee, and I'll be back very shortly.
No problem. I'll see you.
Thanks.
So, Rod, how are you doing, Rod?
Very well, sir. Yourself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They weren't very deep wounds, Rod. They weren't very deep wounds. You're very much a gentleman.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
Yeah. What was
Hello,
the
everybody.
FSI, Rod? Was there an FSI on that?
On this project, Metropolitan?
Yeah.
I don't have the slide in front of me, but it was 6 and change.
Wow. Yeah. Talk about a curveball. Anyways, we'll speak to you soon.
Okay, sir. All the best.
Hey, Carlos, how you doing?
I'm sorry, I'm just checking to see if I was on mute or not. I'm good, and you?
Good, good. I didn't know if we're allowed to talk, but I thought I'd test our audio video while we're here.
Would have liked to just make sure that my share would be okay. Not sure if Leanne is on a break or not.
Right, sure. If you want to look at the bottom right, or sorry, bottom center.
Yeah, no, I see it. Are you okay for me to just share the document so that it's ready to go, or do you want me to wait?
The staff presentation will go first, but if you want to test it, go for
Right.
it.
Oh, okay. No, okay, then I will just test it very quickly. Okay, all right, looks like. All right, okay, looks good. Here, I'll stop.
Leanne,
Yes.
are we ready to go?
Yes, please.
We are. Okay, excellent. Welcome everybody to our last session for today. On the agenda item, we have 1710, 1712 Ellesmere Road, and just wanted to welcome everybody. Understand that this is an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment and plan of subdivision as well, and site plan application. And this is also the first review of this project, so there will be a vote at the end. We are devoting an hour and 20 minutes for the review itself, including within that, the staff will have been given 6 minutes for their presentation, and then the consultant presentation will be 15 minutes. In both cases, when there's 1 minute left, I will just very gently come in and remind you that you have a minute left. And then a panel discussion will follow after that. I just wanted to remind everybody that the session is being live streamed on YouTube and is also being recorded. And the recording will also be available on the City Planning YouTube channel following the meeting. Before we dive into the meeting, I'm going to go to panel roll call. And panel members, when I call out your name, just confirm that you're here and confirm whether you have a conflict of interest. And I'll start with Michael.
No conflict.
Joe.
I'm here, no conflict.
Thank you, Joe. Ralph? Ralph, are you there? I'll come back to Ralph. Olivia?
Here and no conflict.
Thank you. Paul? Hello, Paul? Okay, I'll come back. Anna?
Here, no conflict.
Great, thank you. Eladia?
I'm here, no conflict.
Thanks, Eladia. Now I'm going to go back to Ralph. Leanne, is Ralph still with us?
I believe, yes, he's still in the meeting.
Okay. Ralph, if you can hear me, you may be on mute. Okay, I will assume he's here for the time being. And Paul Kulig. Is Paul still with us, Leanne?
Also still listed in the meeting.
Okay, so if you could keep an eye open for those two, Ralph and Paul, just to make absolutely sure that they're here. I'm going to get started. Now, have I missed any panel members? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at this point. Okay. All right. So let's get started. City team, if you could put your presentation up, you've got it ready to go. 6 minutes, starting now at the 5-minute mark. I will just cut in and let you know that you're 1 minute left. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Gordon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelly Dines. I'm a senior planner in the Scarborough District Office, and with me today is Sasha Terry, senior urban designer, also in Scarborough. I'm sorry, my slides don't seem to be working. Oh, there we go. We're here today to discuss the redevelopment of 1710 to 1712 Ellesmere Road, outlined in red on the map. The site is roughly 1.88 hectares with 75 meters of frontage on Ellesmere and 225 meters of frontage on Grangeway Avenue. It's currently operated by Community Living Toronto, an organization that supports those living with developmental disabilities. Couple of points of interest on the map. Number 3, the big blue square, is the future site of the Scarborough Centre subway station, bus terminal, and transit-oriented development. Abutting the site to the east is a TTC maintenance facility, and the blue hatch lines along both Ellesmere Road and Grangeway Avenue illustrate the future route of the Durham-Scarborough BRT. The 3D model illustrates the emerging built form context in the immediate area, in part supported by the future Scarborough Centre subway station, which is planned to open in 2030-2031. Transit-oriented development is expected to also occur above the subway station and bus terminal. The Scarborough Town Centre Mall Master Plan is highlighted in yellow, and the project 1215 to 55 McCowan Road is highlighted in orange. Just to the north of that project in blue is the 40 Bushby site, the Housing Now project. An OPA rezoning and draft plan of subdivision along with 3 site plan applications were submitted in June of this year. The proposal is for 5 towers, 2 at 49 stories and 1 at 53, 45, and 28 stories. And while the applicant will review the proposal in detail in their presentation, I thought it important to highlight a few key points as we move forward. First, the tower floor plates being proposed appear to exceed the 750 square meters that we like, and additional clarity is being sought in the site statistics package received. Current tower separation distances are 25 meters, whereas emerging directions from the Scarborough Centre secondary plan study recommends a minimum of 30 meters. The north block, where you see the 53 and 49 story towers, includes 7 levels of unwrapped above grade parking. And the submitted wind analysis demonstrates that wind safety criterion have been exceeded in 20 different sensor locations within the site and development. So just to highlight a few planning policies, the site's located in Scarborough Centre on the urban structure map 2. Centers are places with excellent transit accessibility, and they're also places that we expect to absorb population and employment growth outside of the downtown core over the next 30 plus years. The site's also located within mixed use areas on the land use map, which allow for a variety of uses, including residential uses. The scale and density in these particular areas are directly related to the area context and existing and emerging policies. We expect that new buildings frame streets, minimize shadow impacts, transition toward lower scale areas. The site is zoned institutional in the employment district zoning bylaw. Residential uses are not permitted. The Our Scarborough Centre study identifies emerging direction for the street network and a parkland direction for Scarborough Centre. The purple arrows on the map on the right depict the future street network linking the proposed public street through the site through the top end of the TTC yard to the east, transitioning into the approved street network at 675 Progress Avenue, which is number 4 on that map, as well as the planned extension of Bushby Drive. This street is to have a right-of-way of 20 meters. The maps also illustrate the desired future park network. The city is currently in discussions regarding parkland north of the proposal on the TPA parking lots that you see highlighted in green, to make up for lost parkland at both the subway station, number 3 on the map, and the Housing Now site at 40 Bushby, number 2 on the map. The city is also discussing parkland with the TTC for the lands to the east in order to create parkland connections and adjacencies to the north and the east within this district in the center. Emerging directions from the study have also identified 3 height peaks that you can see highlighted by the 3 black circles on the right. In the case of this particular site, only the north portion of the site sits within the subway station height peak with anticipated heights of between 45 and 55 stories. Heights outside of this peak are planned at 15 to 29 stories, similar in heights to the development right next door at 66 and 88 Grangeway, which have towers between 20 and 26 stories. The mid-rise building approved at 1744 Ellesmere just to the east is 15 stories. Our Scarborough Centre also recommends greater separation distances of 30 meters between the towers in order to improve sunlight access, sky view, whereas in this case only 25-meter separation distances are currently proposed. It's important to note that the Scarborough Centre secondary, sorry?
Kelly, you have 1 minute left.
1 minute? Thank you. I'm pretty much finished.
Okay.
The Scarborough Center secondary plan study is wrapping up with expected completion early in 2024. The study will include a planning framework that will guide future development within the center along with urban design guidelines. So the issues we wanted to bring forward for the panel's advice and input include the design of the building, particularly the podium coverage, podium setbacks, above grade parking, and street and parkland animation, as well as tower floor plate and separation distances. The second main area of focus is the tower height and transition in relation to the height peaks within the emerging directions of the study. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly. We're going to move on next to the proponent team presentation, and I'll just wait while you load it up onto the screen.
All right, just give me 1 second.
Sure, no problem. Okay.
All right.
So the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes, 14-minute mark. I'll let you know that you have a minute left.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, panel members. We are very pleased to bring to you today an exciting, important project by the partnership of Tridel, a long-standing respected developer in the Greater Toronto Area, and Community Living Toronto, whose services in the community are long-standing and invaluable to the community they serve. My name is Carlos Antunes. I'm a partner with Kirk Architects, and I will be walking us through the work that we, along with our colleagues, MEP Design and Battlefields, have put together to create the vision for this redevelopment that seeks to establish an integrated community that will provide community-based living and services for supported by CLTO mixed with market housing. Collectively, the proposal focuses on leadership, innovation, and respect for the diverse human needs of the community, creating space that is not just buildings, but provides exceptional service in a safe and welcoming environment that fosters belonging, trust, and positive experiences for all. We have thus organized our presentation into 5 sections: context, master plan, site analysis, build form approach, public ground character, and sustainability highlights of the site. So for context, the site is located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Ellesmere Road and Grangeway Avenue. It is bordered on the southeast by the main driveway into the TTC-RT yard, on the east by the TTC-RT yard and service buildings, and on the north by the RT tracks themselves. The existing 2-story Harold Lawson School is owned by CLTO. From this building, they provide children's respite services, community support, while also housing some of their offices. The site is also located within a 5-minute walk from the existing TTC-RT station. It is east of McCowan Road, Scarborough Civic Center, and Scarborough Town Center, also with immediate proximity and access to Highway 41. To the east are employment areas, to the south are low-rise residential areas. These views identify the site and its relationship to the abutting lands. The following views indicate the current nature of the site and its adjacency to the TTC yard. The site is well located to nearby transit, public services, and retail services. The site has immediate proximity to existing public transit nodes and planned transit extensions. The existing condition offers the McCowan RT station and the TTC and GO bus terminal station to the west. At this time, there are 2 planned transit lines to serve this community, one being the Durham-Scarborough RT route, and the second being the Scarborough subway extension. The site is also well situated near green areas, employment areas, and is an extension to the Scarborough mixed-use redevelopment area identified here in orange. The proposed site massing was prepared in accordance with the official plan policies, Scarborough Center Secondary Plan, and the McCowan Precinct Urban Design Guidelines. The conceptual massing has been prepared to reflect a number of contextual considerations, including the size and depth of the site, proximity to the existing and planned transit, surrounding built form, and our preliminary analysis of shadow impact and the proximity to the neighborhoods. The master plan structure is rooted in CLTO's vision to address their community's needs of welcome, stay, and flow. The redevelopment of the site provides a unique opportunity to establish an inclusive community in Toronto. The proposed master plan provides a mix of uses, a mix of housing options with affordable and market housing. Providing new public spaces and community services and non-residential uses is also a goal. The guiding principles and key elements are as follows. Establish an inclusive and accessible community with strong sense of place. Connect and engage by encouraging all models of movement. Reinforce the site's significance as a southern entry into Scarborough Centre. Provide a mix of housing types and tenures, including affordable and market units. Animate and cultivate a sense of place. Create a compatible development with appropriate transitions. Prioritize high quality and affordable design of spaces and promote excellence in architecture and landscape design. Integrate innovation and sustainable design approaches. The site is organized into 3 blocks that front the new east-west public road and Public Road A and the new park along with 4 anchoring pop areas. The plan prioritizes the pedestrian experience and provides opportunities for passive and active recreation through a well-connected network of open spaces. These spaces will not only improve the pedestrian movement, but also promote a healthy lifestyle by encouraging transit use, cycling, walking, and fostering interaction throughout the site. The master plan is organized into 3 blocks. Block 1 with 2 residential towers of 53 and 49 stories, 1,060 units, 797 bicycle spaces, an amenity ratio of 2 square meters per unit, and a parking ratio of 0.65 for a total of 706 parking spaces. Block 2 with 2 residential towers, 49 and 45 stories, 1,052 units, 790 bicycle spaces, an amenity ratio of 2 square meters, and a parking ratio of 0.65 for a total of 684 parking spaces. Block 3, the tower you see on there is a CLTO building, 1 residential building, 28 stories, 280 units, of which 30% are affordable, 211 bicycle spaces, an amenity ratio of 2 square meters, and a parking ratio of 0.3 for a total of 119 parking spaces. And the public park is a 1,367 square meter public space. The proposed development will accommodate vehicular movement and parking as well as loading, such as to limit the impact on the public realm. A potential future extension of a Street A connects to the approved street at Progress Avenue to the north. The new street will be created in a pedestrian-friendly way to create a more legible connection to Grangeway. 3 private driveways are proposed to provide access to the internal block vehicular network. This allows for minimal interaction with pedestrian network. The development promotes pedestrian and cycling through planned cycling infrastructure, internal bicycle storage areas at grade, and other site storage short-term bicycle spaces throughout. Active pedestrian routes are arranged to support and improve public access throughout the site with the mid-block connection, open spaces, and sidewalk zones. A number of active uses are located at grade, including retail, community space, residential units, and amenity spaces. These uses are located throughout and adjacent to the public spaces to promote and animate the public realm. The cafe and community center are located next to the public park. The POPs is in line with the residential units and accessible to CLTO entrances. The public realm will consist of a network of public and publicly accessible spaces for residents, workers, and visitors. The key elements of the public realm include 2 existing public streets, 1 new public street, 1 new public park, and 4 POPs strategically located within the site. Our landscape plan indicating the routes throughout. Built form. The build form for the site builds upon the vision established by the Scarborough Centre secondary plan to provide appropriate response to the emerging pattern of the development in the area. The 3 blocks consist of stepping podiums with towers that are set back from the podium edges. Towers are in a point tower configuration while maintaining appropriate separation distances. Level 1 is programmed with a number of mixed-use functions that edge each podium while addressing the public realm with retail, coffee shop, community center, residences, and amenity areas. Level 2 contains office and respite facilities in the CLTO Block 3 building, while the Market building contains residences and amenity areas. Podium levels contain residential functions and amenity functions and above-grade parking for the northerly block. Level 7 contains extensive outdoor amenity areas and residential areas. The point towers contain the residential units. All roofs are planted with either green roof planting areas, and amenity areas are planted to support outdoor amenity functions. Public realm. To promote a vision of inclusive and accessible design and a community, 3 gateway areas are identified to establish a sense of welcome and orientation. A concept of moments is emphasized throughout to animate and cultivate a sense of place. Various landscape features are utilized to promote accessibility to all senses, using continuous paved markings, lighting of different intensities and scale, spaces that promote respite and activity, and establish markers and a sense of orientation for those that CLTO service and the community at large. The new Street A will function as a landscape and pedestrian-oriented boulevard. The street is designed as a 18.5 meter right-of-way with 2.1 meter sidewalks, minimum of 2.2 planting area, and 8 meters of paved area. The following are views of the previously described public realm. This illustrates a view northward through the POPs area. This view is an illustration of the varied function along Grangeway and the access to the CLTO building. This view shows the connection of the ground-related functions at the public park. This is a view towards the public park along the public Street A. This is a view of the gateway function to the public park for the community. A bird's eye view of the public park. The massing of the towers is in relationship to the ground-related functions. As described earlier, one of the key vision statements for the site is exploring innovative and sustainable design. Tridel is a long-standing sustainability award-winning developer that explores and implements sustainable strategies in all of its developments and will continue this exploration, be it through meeting the requirements of TGS 4 version 1 and creating a LEED Gold project. CLTO will also promote creating a healthy and comfortable environment while looking to achieve broader sustainability goals. With these goals, there are financial needs with increased construction and related costs that will need to be addressed by public funding. All the key goals focus on community health and benefits through the introduction of amenities and active transportation through well-connected transit and bike pedestrian paths. The measures to accomplish the goals will be through site development, water efficiency, energy efficiency, building materials, waste management, landscape features, bird-friendly treatment, accessibility features, and building resiliencies. Thank you for your attention, and we look to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Carlos. We're now going to move on to questions of clarification, and these are questions from panel members. It can be directed towards the proponent team and or the city team. And panel members, if you could raise your virtual hands, and I see some hands coming up already. We'll get started. We're going to start with Joe, and then Anna, Ralph, Olivia, Eladia, and Michael. So we'll start with Joe.
Maybe three quick questions to start, and I'll. One is, what are the footprint sizes of each of the towers proposed? And the separation distance between each of them. Why is the park on the south side of the east-west road rather than on the north side where it would receive more sun? It looks like it's going to receive a huge amount of shadow in its current position. We don't see a shadow study that helps understand that. And do you have any views of the 7-story above-grade parking structure so that we can understand, how does that fit into this context? Thank you.
All right, thank you. So first question, 800 meters are the floor plates for the towers. Sorry, the second question was related to the park. Oh, sorry, the separation distance is 25 meters between the towers.
Okay.
The park,
yeah,
the location of the park has been, it's a combination of coordinating with the road patterning and establishing a connection with the east-west road that moves through, and it was important to have a direct connectivity with the CLTO building. Its at-grade functions, because we didn't want the children and the users of the CLTO building to have to cross the street to a public park, so it was important to have this direct connectivity to the park. We have looked at the shadow studies on it, and we are confident that there is a substantial sunlight. Sorry, the fourth question was regarding to the
parking garage. Yeah,
the parking garage.
Above grade, yeah.
I mean, at this time, we don't have full images of that, as it still continues to evolve. But it's in keeping with the characteristic of the building, the podium levels. It's not an open garage. It will be fenestrated in the same manner as the rest of the project.
Thank you.
Okay, great. We're going to move on next to Anna.
Hi, thank you. It's just a question related, I guess, to Joe's question. I'm just wondering if there's a rationale for why the parking is above grade on this site. Is there a need for it to be above grade, or is this a?
Well, it's two functions. One is as it relates to the yards, the current condition and the foreseeable condition of the TTC. We're reacting to what is there and what will be there. We didn't think it was appropriate to put residential units in that location, and it allowed us to we're talking about, it's about 50% of the parking that we have is below grade in 3 levels, and then the remainder was above grade.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Anna?
Nope. Thanks.
Nope. Okay. On to Ralph.
Thank you, Gord. Can you tell us your rationale for building heights and FSI?
It's a combination of looking at the relationship of the site to how its relationship to the buildings and what we see moving forward in the future. It is also a function of understanding what makes the site work for both for CLTO from both a financial and delivery of its uses. And it's a combination of really making the site work long term.
Maybe I'll just jump in on that. As the planners and urban designers, we did the analysis looking at the heights in the surrounding and also consideration for the area being in proximity to two higher order transit routes, and looking at the development potential in the surroundings. So that was a part of the block context plan that we prepared. And that had consideration for heights in the surroundings.
Okay. Ralph, does that answer your question?
Sure.
Okay. On to Olivia. Hello, Olivia. Oh, you might be muted.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have two questions. The first, can you confirm whether the TTC maintenance facility is supposed to stay or go? I think I saw some plans with it there, some with taller buildings there.
If I could provide a response for that, it's Kelly Dines with Community Planning. The TTC is working on a confidential project for those lands, and it's still something that can't be shared publicly yet, but there will be redevelopment, but not of a residential nature.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, you referenced Toronto Green Standard version 1. That's a really old standard. What standard will you be required to comply with?
Sorry, I just want to. The tier 4, version 1, yeah.
Right, but as per your SPA submission, will you be required to comply with version 3 or 4?
At this time, the minimum version that we have been asked to provide, that's the minimum. We're always looking, as I sort of mentioned, we're always looking towards going higher than that. And we'll continue working with staff as to what that will be. But that will be at minimum. But we've all, Tridel is more often than not have gone to higher versions and higher requirements, and that's something that we'll continue to look at as we proceed with working with staff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next, Aladia.
I think my question was largely answered, but I don't know if I should just open the door for a more specific answer. So the our Scarborough study identified this area for a certain height of building, and this exceeds it. And it also, we've been informed, has recommended a 30-meter clearance between towers and a smaller floor plate on towers. So it exceeds all of this, these guidelines. And I'm just wondering, the design team had anything further to add on that? Why this rationale for the quite high towers here, as opposed to say the 15-story that's recommended, in particular along Ellesmere? I know you've sort of spoken to it already, but just offering an opportunity for a higher level of refinement to the response.
Carlos, I'm happy to address that or start
Yeah,
to.
yeah, go ahead.
You know, I think when we're looking at a site, certainly when there's emerging policy, we take that into account and have addressed that in the planning rationale, but it's not in effect yet. And so we do our own analysis, and we looked at the built form impacts. We looked at the context, and again, it was our opinion that these heights were appropriate. A lot of that relates to having two higher order transit routes, and being able to support those routes with intensification, and also consideration for the built form impacts, looking at the tower separation, light view privacy, etc. we felt that the 25 meters was sufficient and that the heights were appropriate.
Okay.
Just to add a note on the 25 meters, in looking at the plan, there are very small areas that are 25 meters because the towers were designed to veer away from each other. So you'll get, at minimum is 25, and then they veer out, some of them as much as 40 meters. So, the location and the display of the towers is to, and it very directly indicates and shows that kind of compression that happens between each one of them, and then an opening to a wider space. So it's although we're talking about 25 meters, but it's also 25, 30, 35, and so on. So it's not limited to one dimension.
Lady, does that answer your question? Yes. And then on to. Okay, thank you. On to Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the public realm drawings in section 4, and I'm interested in understanding the vehicle movements that are taking place in the lower level of the CLTO building near garden apartments and units in the southwest corner of the site. Can I get some additional information about what's going on there?
Sorry, which drawing are you looking at?
Page 29, 30. There's looks like two vehicles in, one vehicle out, parking spaces, and then.
But so the function.
Yeah.
So the function of the ground plane. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the.
It's got a lot of stripes on it there, off Grange Way Avenue.
Right. So the function is there's a single in and out driveway. It's organized that there are two entrances off that central vehicle drop off and access to both the underground and loading space. Because of the functions that happen with the requirements with CLTO in terms of dropping off both adults and children at the building, it's important to drive into the covered protected area to then drop off for the CLTO building on the south side and also for the residents on the north. So it's a way for us to kind of organize and control the movements that happen for the day-to-day functioning of the CLTO building. And also then this allows us to have a direct access to the proposed park on the north. Inside of between sort of protecting this function on the north side and the south side of the CLTO is then a driveway into its underground parking garage and loading offset on the north side.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. I think that completes our questions. Ralph and the lady, I still see your hands up, but no questions.
I have just one more question.
Very quick.
Can you explain the shape of your park? How you came to the shape of your park?
So it's a combination of in terms of creating. So the boundaries on the north are clear. The boundaries on the south are clear in terms of its relationship to and then the boundary on the west. The boundary on the east was there is a requirement for Street A that in the interim, and we're not quite sure what the interims will mean, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, is to create a cul-de-sac condition for the public Street A. So that cul-de-sac condition will stay in place until such time as Street A will continue on to the approved Progress Avenue. So in order to maintain that public cul-de-sac space to the right, we ended up having to squeeze the park to the left. And then we sort of took advantage of that so that as it veers southward towards Block 2, so that Block 2 also has frontage on the park. So that was a sort of combination of its boundaries and also the future the cul-de-sac to deal with the future connection.
And perhaps if I could just add to that very quickly, if you look at perhaps slide 18, you can see where the proposed park is, the POPs, including the mid-block connection. So all of that is intended to function together so that you can move from Ellesmere up to the park. There's a POPs proposed on the east side of the park as well. And so it would provide that seamless open space connection throughout the site from Ellesmere up to the park and then over to the new public street.
Okay. I'm going to move on from questions of clarification. Thank you very much for on the proponent and city side for the answers. We have 7 panel members here. I'm going to suggest that you self-manage your time, 2 minutes each. And if there are any questions or further comments after that, we can always circle back. The order I'm proposing is Joe, Anna, Paul, Ralph, Eladia, Olivia, and Michael. And we'll start with Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm having a fair bit of difficulty with much of this project. I guess I want to put it initially in the larger context of the Scarborough Town Centre plan and how important and critical the evolution of that plan is. And I'm concerned about, the response to, well, it's a plan in progress, and so it's not in effect, and we had another idea. The city has invested a huge amount in trying to figure out how to make a great community at Scarborough Centre. With all due respect, a whole bunch of really fat towers close together with massive above-grade parking garages, notwithstanding close proximity to Harvard or transit, I don't think matches the vision of what we want our future cities to be, what we want the future of Scarborough Centre to be. I see a fair bit of disconnect between some of the words used and what we're really seeing. The park to me looks like it's almost always going to be in shadow. I know the designer said, well, we think it's got enough light, but there's no evidence of that. And it's got fairly tall buildings on its west flank, tall buildings on its south flank, on its north flank. So, and then the east part of the park, when it gets into POPs, is mostly hard surface and vehicular turnarounds. So it does not look like a place that really works from a public space perspective. The comment about the rationale for height, there actually wasn't a rationale for height. It just, I mean, the amount of density proposed here is enormous. It seems extreme, and I'm not hearing any kind of, and this kind of uniformity of height is, to me, very troubling. This sort of monoculture of giant fat buildings that, have very large footprints and very massive podiums that cover so much of the site is quite troubling. We saw a project earlier today that I think provides quite a contrast to, I think, this approach, and I was commenting on that earlier. It doesn't add up to me. And to me, the concern, I recall the Housing Now site just to the northwest of this that came to the panel a while ago, and I recall lots of concerns being expressed by the panel about that project too, notwithstanding that the city itself, through Create TO, was proposing that, but basically just a bunch of towers put as close together as they could and made fat. And you know, so how does this become a walkable community that you're going to love living in when all is said and done? I'm getting a sense that the developers that are coming along and the designers are creating places that fundamentally have a huge amount of parking, and where there's this expectation everybody's going to drive, notwithstanding the investment in public transit, and not an incredibly pleasant public realm to walk around in. And from a sustainability perspective, I'm highly doubtful that the project that we see in front of us is capable of addressing the evolving Toronto Green Standards. I think the evolution towards more and more of an emphasis on embodied carbon is really important, and the amount of parking just in and of itself here is not going to be supportive of achieving the sustainability goals. And so I don't buy the, you know, we're going to exceed, you know, what we're being asked to do. I think it's quite the contrary. The parking garage location and the notion that you're simply designing it for the current condition of a TTC yard is not forward looking. This is not going to be a TTC yard forever, and this is not a nice way to address your northern neighbor or your eastern neighbor. So I'm finding a lot of disconnect between some of the words and the objectives of the city, a lot of the significant investment in trying to think about how to make Scarborough Centre a great place, and what's in front of us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Moving on to Anna.
Hi, thanks. I'm going to just pick up on that idea of evolution that you brought up, Joe. You know, you're designing a site that's a bit of an island, and I think it looks like it will be an island for many years to come. But what, you know, I think it's probably worth thinking about the long-term future of this site. So for the parking garage and those edges that face the yard, and also, you know, there's a huge edge that looks towards Ellesmere. I'm just wondering if there can be some kind of flexibility in that use worked in, so that in the future, when, you know, you do have a development to your north, you can convert it. You know, perhaps it's something that can evolve over time when the context evolves. If you can build some flexibility into it. I understand the constraints of construction costs and what we're facing today, so I think that demands a bit of creativity in how we deal with these. With parking in particular, it's very, very expensive to build, and we might not need it for much longer. So it's in a way, it's a very short-term solution. So I wonder if it can become something else in the future. And then just again, about your point about prioritizing the pedestrian and flow. I think were two things you mentioned. Again, if you could perhaps think about how, you know, those very large footprints of those buildings can be a bit more porous and be able to connect to the surrounding community when it appears. Today, there's not one, but in the future, there will be. And then last comment is just about the park and the uses that are up against it. I think the top of the podium creates a wonderful opportunity for outdoor space for, you know, for the residents of this property. There's a large expanse of space up there, and so I wonder, will the park, you know, being a public park, be used in a different way? I see it's adjacent to indoor amenity. Is there potential to have perhaps community use or retail use against it that could animate it in a different way? So those are my comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Moving on to Paul and then Ralph.
You hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll echo almost exactly everything Joe and Anna just said and zero in on a couple sort of maybe mobility elements. And a lot of the justification, I guess, for height and density and the moves here is based on the investment of the subway. And yet, other than appearing as a dot that's whatever, 400, 500 meters away, we never hear about how one gets to or from that subway. And when you look at it closely in the public realm plan, we've got literally the absolute minimum 2.1 meter city standard sidewalks on Grangeway Drive. If that subway truly is the kind of justification for everything here, that should be a real focus of the investment here in the public realm. It should be the main gateway, the entryway to and from the site, or similarly the BRT to the south. And all I'm saying is a minimum 2.1 meter concrete sidewalk with sod on either side. So, and zero acknowledgement of the fact that Grangeway dips under the existing LRT. I mean, there's actually some complicated topography, maybe safety, lighting, septet issues that need to be addressed to kind of match that density and ambition that's hanging its hat on the subway. Similarly, the pickup and drop-offs, maybe there's a justification for elements of the CLTO programming, but the other two buildings really just feel like a traditionally suburban approach to servicing pickup and drop-off. That is really what we're about to get away from, and investing literally billions of dollars to remedy, and yet we're seeing site plans that replicate that precise thing. So your new Street A has not one, not two, but three driveways that pedestrians now need to negotiate every time they cross. Similarly, when we talk about biking, if this is going to be a high density community with high mode share, we don't even have one biking parking spot per unit, never mind bedroom, right? So there's one person per bike. If you've got a 2-bedroom unit, one would assume you'd want at least 2 bikes. Otherwise, it's not a mode of transportation. It's a recreational tool that maybe some people use. Similarly, where are the investments in the cycling infrastructure in the streets that get us to schools or other connections? There's the Y immediately across McCowan at the town center. None of this is sort of acknowledged, and instead we're getting bare minimum standards. So I really think that this is only one example, to Joe's point, but the mobility elements need to be brought in line with the sort of rationale and justification and ambition that you start with when you talk about density and height. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. On to Ralph and then Aladia.
Thank you, Gord. So, you know, it's I love urban design and I love development, but it has to be beautiful. There has to be joy. There has to be joy in living in a community. And all I heard was the architectonic explanation of a pro forma may be done by an engineer. And I don't get it. I don't get the math. I don't get that, well, we can do this and we can do that. We're allowed to do this. It kind of fits. We think it is. So, you know, let me see. AG Court Mall, 3.5 FSI. Tons of towers. Golden Mile, 3.9 FSI. Tons of towers. Scarborough Junction, 5 times FSI that we're desperately trying to get, have not gotten. Tons of towers. So those are 3 large sites that we're working on. And so I'm going, okay, all right, this is like almost 3 times agent court density. And I'm like, okay, you know, let's see what they're offering. What is the give? What are they giving us? And I don't see anything. I just see it's going to be scary. And I kind of think, you know, if Tridel is doing such a great job at Alexander Park, that same developer is going to be proud of what they're doing here. And of course, there's an economic argument for community living, but it can't be just mean. We're going to get judged by what gets built. And I'm a developer guy, and I just don't get it. I don't understand how you can double an FSI and not double the park. Like, we can double the height because we can, but we won't double the park. Like, it's just not right. It's not right. I can't understand it. It just can't be wildebeest at the watering hole. Everybody go for everything. And if you're going for height and you're going for density, please give us something really beautiful as a place to live. And community living deserves it because they're going to be living that when it's built. So I want to support it, but it's just too much. It's too much.
Thank you, Ralph. We will move on next to Aladia and Olivia and Michael.
A couple things that I liked about the project: external balconies, which can be thermally broken. A consideration of continuity of green space, so pods that link to parks, that link to gateways, and punctuate the block as a whole. The linking of amenity spaces to outdoor amenity spaces, and some consideration of desired lines where people will want to move throughout the site. Some things that could definitely make this project better would be a consideration of your northeast and southeast facades, which are currently blank at the main level and won't anticipate future developments. The floor plates are very large at the main level and at the upper levels also. They're very, very overbearing on quite a tight site plan. For example, that pods area that goes from Ellesmere north, sorry, I'm just trying to scroll through, Ellesmere north up into the park area in the center is extremely narrow, and it's flanked on both sides by really tall towers. That is not going to be pleasant. I don't think there's anything you can do to make that pleasant. So those floor plates on the main levels and the towers on the upper levels, I think, need to be pulled back somewhat from each other, just smaller floor plates. And furthermore, anticipating the future. So perhaps this is a phased plan, as Anna had suggested, that we have a plan for when the TTC maintenance yard is no longer a TTC maintenance yard, and we're not just turning a blank back on it with a straightforward offset from that property line. That seems like not enough forethought. So there are strategies that one could use that come to mind. Perhaps those parking spaces are leased for a lease that will terminate in a number of years, and then they could be re-inhabited. But even so, I think the floor plates as a whole on the lower levels are just too big. They're so unwieldy, and it's a maze in there. I would definitely get lost. Oh my God, I'd never find my way out of that parking. So think about, I think what Ralph said, finding joy in a project is really important. And the public realm moments seem extremely constrained. So in space, but also in design courage, shall we say. These are spaces, the precedents that are shown are highly pavement based. So lots of pavement, lots of mown grass. I mean, that's not an inspiring place to be. So, let some life into here. I think some breathing room, some excitement and some joy. And I think some of those moves might help with that. I mean, one tiny example of that would be the amenity zone on levels 3 to 6 facing Ellesmere is so skinny that I can't see what you would do in that little outdoor area. And it's flanked with like a 3-story wall. I do support the above grade parking versus below grade parking, but like it has to be done gently and with a great deal of consideration, deliberation, and an eye to how this site will be changing in the coming years. So those are the things I would put forward to you for consideration.
Thank you, Lydia. On to Olivia and then Michael.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with a lot of the comments that have already been made. So I'll add in terms of sustainability, I think you really need to clarify what your requirements are and not to harp on version numbers. I suspect you'll be required to comply with version 4, and I think it's important to bring up because it's not just business as usual, right? It requires strategizing from an early stage, even where you are right now. So I think understanding what your requirements are and formulating that strategy is really important. Agreeing with Aladia's comments on above grade parking. So I think this one is a bit tricky because we are finding that below grade parking is really blowing our embodied carbon sort of out of the water. So how can you do a good job of this and really kind of set a precedent? We don't see a lot of these now. So first, I would encourage you to be really aggressive on your parking numbers. I mean, you're tied to so much transit here. You don't need that much parking. So I think if you can significantly reduce the amount of parking that you have, that's a good start. Thinking about what you're facing adjacent. And I think it's been mentioned that that maintenance facility isn't going to be there forever. So how do you relate to the adjacent sites? The design of that facade is going to be really important as well. And then just thinking a bit more long-term. So I'm going to refer you to the Waterfront Toronto Green Standard, which has a section on adaptation and flexibility and thinking about how a parking structure today could be converted to something else tomorrow. So building in that flexibility and long-term thinking. And then I'm going to mention for your green roof strategy, please consider pushing down your green roofs to the podium level. They're not just there for a requirement. I think in terms of stormwater management, in terms of what people are looking down on and the biophilic value, I think that's really important as well. And then finally, agreeing with the other comments on tower separations, that 25 meters in the tall building guidelines is a minimum. And it specifically notes that as you go higher, the expectation is that that number will grow. So I think just think about the quality of light and views that are within those units. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Last but not least, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thinking about open space and park space, like how big is big enough? And I realize that there are percentages and guidelines, 10%, 15%, but one way to think about it is about what might go on there. So contemplation, play, multiple overlapping uses, and delight for 3,450 people. So when you look at the space that's being shown there now, obviously there will be other amenities in the neighborhood, but 3,450 people. How does one achieve delight and multiple overlapping uses as a starting point for that space? So that's one thing I wanted to point out. Another thing was, it's interesting, I'm looking at page 9 in the presentation, and there's a conceptual soft site massing. It's interesting to see even though I understand that this isn't necessarily conforming with the City of Toronto's plan for heights and so on, but interesting to see that almost every one of the blocks that's shown in the conceptual massing is showing blocks making well-defined street edges. Oh, and that the shadows are coming from the towers, but not from the podia. in the case of the site being discussed today, it's not very easy to see that same strategy applied. And one tends to think, at least I certainly think, that degree zero of city making is getting a clear, legible, easily recognizable continuity of a street. And it seems that when you go into the detail of the plans being showed now, every opportunity is being taken to not make clearly identifiable street edges. So I would wonder whether that's an important next step. And then finally, through the 60s and 70s, we observed many projects being built in outlying areas where parking was used as a barrier against an inhospitable edge. And then 20 or 30 years later, that environment changes completely, and suddenly the building is the inhospitable edge, not the surroundings. And I wonder about using that strategy with the above grade parking in these circumstances. There needs to be more thought put into what the current situation is, because clearly the roads are anticipating the future. Shouldn't the building clearly anticipate the future, especially when, if you observe what the city is planning for park space and development, some of these parking structures are going to be adjacent to future public realm and park space. So to me, there are some fundamental strategies that are need much more careful consideration for this successful project.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, panel members, for the all of the comments, and thank you to the proponent team. First, for your patience as we ran a bit late on the previous session, and you very kindly waited. This is this is an interesting project, and what I'm supposed to do right now is I'm supposed to sort of provide sort of the key, up to 5 sort of key things that people have said, but I think really there's just one, and I hear it recurring in the comments, and that is that we're looking for a project, and we've been seeing projects in Scarborough, the Scarborough town center area for a number of years. So this has been a part of the city that we've been following, and I guess we're looking for a project that does something good for Scarborough Town Center. And it's tough to find, and it's tough to find in this project. And I guess the thing that I hear in the people around the table, the panel members, is a desire for it to be better than it is. And for me, looking at this, of all the slides I looked at, and I'm just sort of scooting around here trying to find the one I'm thinking about, it's the one that specifically talks about the CLTO vision and goals, welcome, stay, flow, arrival, departure, play, rest. There's a whole series of things here, and I think that if the design could back up and look at that and design for that. I know that the words have been spoken about doing it, but the results don't really show it. And where these things happen, they happen in such compressed spaces with context created on the site itself that makes it probably not the best situation to be able to have these notions of welcome, stay, and flow. I mean, in a sense, the answer lies within these vision and goals, but the results are not there. And that's a sad moment, because this project could be the one that shows how it could be done right, especially with a partner like Community Living TO involved. And I think that there was an earlier comment that was made, and that is, and we've done this before, we've looked for this before, and that is, increasingly, if there's going to be a lot of density and a lot of height being asked for, there's got to be a good reason for it, but it's got to be in contributing to the city, contributing to the community. And I don't know if we heard that in this presentation. So those are the things that are taken away there. I can't provide you with five key things. I can provide you with one key thing, and that is look to your partner, look to CLTO, look to the vision and goals, and do an analysis now of whether it actually lives up to that. So we're going to call for a vote. Leanne, if you could pull up the vote sheet. It's a first review. And in first review, we vote for support or non-support. Sometimes with support, there may be a few key conditions that can be applied and said we would support if the following happened. And I will ask the panel now if there are any conditions that they would want to apply to that vote of support. I'll just wait for a moment. I'm not seeing any comments on that. So I'm going to call the vote. And as I call out your name, if you could tell me whether you vote for support or non-support, that would be great. I'll start with Michael.
Non-support.
Joe.
Non-support.
Ralph.
Non-support.
Olivia.
Non-support.
Paul.
Non-support.
Thanks, Paul. Anna.
Non-support.
And Leanne, I think you told me that Eladia is not here now.
I think she switched to a phone.
Oh, sorry about that, Eladia.
Yes, I had a reservation, but I'm on my cell. Non-support. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. So voted. Again, we thank the proponent team for the presentation. We know that it's a great team, a great developer, a great cause in CLTO. We look forward to seeing this come back again, and that it does the vision and goals proud, and that it becomes an exemplar in Scarborough Town Centre. So there's work to be done. Thank you very much, everybody. Sorry for the late day. I think we're done for the day. So thank you. Have a good evening, and we'll meet again next month.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.